So is policy taking account of some of these myths that need to be challenged? Are we working with young people in the right way? If we have a look at the government's current key priorities for ending gang violence and exploitation, they do seem to suggest that policy and the government are aware of young people being vulnerable to exploitation. They talk about tackling county lines and the exploitation of vulnerable young people by a hardcore of gang members. They talk about protecting vulnerable locations where vulnerable young people can be targeted. They talk about reducing violence and knife crime, safeguarding gang-associated young women and girls, and promoting early intervention, and also promoting meaningful alternatives. And while these kind of priorities seem to fit with what I've found in my research, often the actual responses that come out of these priorities end up being used in much more punitive ways. So, for example, although one of the key priorities is promoting meaningful alternative to gangs, such as education, training and employment, one of the key responses under that is simply to kind of reduce the threshold of what is considered persistent absence from school, so that you can then respond to that in often punitive ways if a young person's considered persistently absent. Gang injunctions are supposed to, in theory, protect rather than simply prevent young people from becoming involved in crime. And yet the way that they're implemented is in quite a punitive way, in which a young person may be subject to orders that prevent them from entering certain areas or doing certain things or engaging with certain people, and the consequence of breaking those orders is usually a custodial sentence. So although we're kind of saying, yes, we recognise that you're vulnerable and we want to protect you, we're still responding in a dominantly punitive way rather than a supportive one. And from talking to the young people and the practitioners in my research, I would suggest what we need to do is focus more on identifying long-term role models for the young people, reinvesting in youth services, in year-round youth services in local communities, so that young people have long-term interventions from trusted professionals, working on their relationships with their families, helping them to understand the consequences of crime in relation to the impact on their families, not the impact on themselves in terms of penal consequences. And in general, just kind of moving towards a much more educational and supportive model of crime prevention, rather than trying to scare young people out of crime by focusing on going to prison, criminal records, or the kind of punitive and penal consequences that can occur as a result of becoming involved.